The long road. The van shuddered as it rolled down the empty highway, its tires humming against the cracked asphalt. Lydia sat in the passenger seat, watching the fuel gauge needle dip closer to empty. "We're running out of gas," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. Max, gripping the wheel, glanced at her. "We'll find something. It's a shortcut, remember?" Lydia scoffed. "A shortcut to where? There hasn't been a sign of life for miles." From the back seat, Vanessa chimed in, her voice wavering. "Let's just keep going. There has to be something ahead." And there was. The first sign of civilization came in the form of a weathered board leaning precariously on rusted poles. "Last stop gas, 2 miles. "Finally," Chloe muttered from the back. When they arrived, the gas station looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The neon sign buzzed faintly, half the letters flickering. The windows were grimy, smeared with streaks of brownish red. "I don't like this," Lydia said under her breath. "You don't like anything," Danny teased as he hopped out of the van. Inside, a man stood behind the counter. His overalls were stained, and his eyes. Something was wrong with them. Too wide. Too fixed. "Pump's broken," he said flatly, "but I got gas in cans out back." Max handed over some cash, and the man shuffled outside, leading Danny with him. The rest of them waited, the silence in the station thick and suffocating. Minutes passed, then a blood-curdling scream ripped through the air. "Danny!" Vanessa yelled, bolting for the door. Lydia grabbed the flashlight and ran after her. Chloe followed, her steps hesitant. Behind the station, the stench of blood hit them before they saw it. Danny's body lay sprawled on the ground, his throat a gaping wound. The gas cans he'd been reaching for were tipped over, liquid pooling around him. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. A sharp movement from the shadows made Lydia turn. The attendant emerged, holding a machete, his face twisted into a grotesque grin. "Run!" Lydia screamed, shoving Vanessa and Chloe back toward the van. They sprinted, their breath ragged. The van came into view. But when they reached it, Max was slumped over the steering wheel, blood dripping from his chest. Lydia yanked open the door, shoving Max's lifeless body aside. "Get in!" She twisted the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life as the attendant appeared, slamming his fists against the window. Lydia floored it, the van lurching forward. The road was a blur of trees and darkness as they sped away. Vanessa sobbed quietly in the back seat. Chloe sat frozen, staring at the blood on her hands. "What do we do?" Vanessa finally choked out. "We keep going," Lydia said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The road twisted sharply, and suddenly a figure appeared in the headlights, a man standing motionless in the middle of the lane. Lydia swerved, the van crashing into the ditch with a violent jolt. When she came to, the air was thick with the smell of gasoline and blood. Lydia groaned, struggling to unbuckle her seatbelt. "Vanessa? Chloe!" she called, her voice hoarse. No response. She stumbled out of the wreckage. Chloe's body lay nearby, her head at an unnatural angle. Lydia's stomach turned as she fought back a scream. "Lydia!" She spun around, spotting Vanessa limping toward her. Relief flooded her until she noticed the blood. It soaked Vanessa's shirt, and in her hand, she clutched a knife. "Vanessa?" Lydia asked, taking a step back. Vanessa didn't answer. Her eyes were dull, empty. Then she lunged. Lydia dodged, grabbing a shard of glass from the wreckage. In one desperate motion, she drove it into Vanessa's stomach. Her friend gasped, her body crumpling to the ground. Tears streamed down Lydia's face as she stumbled back onto the road, her legs barely carrying her. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow on the deserted stretch ahead. And then she saw him. The attendant stood in the distance, silhouetted against the horizon, his grin as wide and unnatural as before. "You've got fight in you," he called out, his voice carrying through the night. Lydia didn't wait to hear more. She ran, her feet pounding against the asphalt. By dawn, she was staggering down the road when a car finally stopped. A man stepped out, his face a blur through her tears. "Please," she whispered, collapsing into his arms. "Help me." As the car drove her away, she glanced back through the rearview mirror. In the distance, the gas station sign flickered, and the attendant's figure grew smaller. But his grin stayed with her, burned into her mind, a haunting reminder that some roads should never be taken.